Yes.
Yep.
Great. Good morning to everybody. I'll call the meeting to order. Lovely to see you all. And let's see, we've got approval of the minutes from our last meeting. Did anybody have changes or edits?
In the absence of any changes, I move that we approve the minutes as submitted.
Great. I was just pausing to see if anyone else had one. I had just a quick question. It probably is not a problem repeating this, but on page 4. Oh, I had one question on the first paragraph on page 4. There's just a line that says, and then there was some potential conflict mentioned between reintroducing beavers in the ECFR and the ECFR management plan, St. Dennis said. And I just wanted some clarification on that.
Where is that?
That is the first paragraph at the top of page 4. It's the third sentence.
Let's see.
I know what it was.
Oh, yeah.
I don't know if you want to speak to that, Bruce, or.
Yes, I can speak to that.
Meeting.
For the record, Bruce St. Dennis, City Manager. A while back, we had a meeting with several people from the Conservancy Board and state, and the conversation was about introducing. I guess I look this way. Was introducing beavers into the ECFR, and when we were going through that, it became more clear that we needed more information. As opposed to saying, well, let's just go ahead and do this now. And one of the points that was made was that and I don't recall exactly what it was, but it was either the master plan and the OWEB agreement or something didn't agree, or our master plan didn't promote this particular activity as a priority or something like that. And that's when we ended up stepping back and saying, well, let's go ahead and do this preliminary to try, to step back and talk about what needs to happen in Cannon Beach before we can take the next step of applying for significant funds. And I'm sorry, I don't have more detail on it, but I do recall that there was something that needed to be corrected or added or something.
Brought into alignment. Okay, great. Thank you. I just wanted that clarification.
That's all it was.
But I wonder if the word conflict is the wrong word, if it should be, there was some potential issues.
Or clarification needed.
I agree. I probably use the word conflict too quickly.
Right.
Could we say there was some clarification needed regarding reintroducing beavers in the ECFR and the management plan?
Yes.
That's even better.
Yes. Thank you.
Great, thank you. And then I don't know if this was a repeat or not, and I see Jen is here. I guess there's no problem. I'm not sure that I mentioned not having serial meetings twice. It looked like it was the same sentence inserted there from previous. I guess there's no harm in mentioning that twice, and if I did, great, and if I didn't, that's fine.
Where is that?
It's right under
Right
that
after that.
paragraph we were just talking about. That same sentence was inserted on the first page, and it looked like it might have just been inserted again, but perhaps not. So
It's in there at least twice.
yeah, those were my only two comments. Anything else?
With that clarification, I move that we approve the minutes.
Second.
Those in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? Great, thank you all. Okay. Do we have any public comment today?
I did not receive any requests to speak.
Okay, thank you. So our discussion items, monthly state of the parks. Now, unless something has changed, I think Kirk said he was going to do a double report in October as he's not here this month, but I don't know if there's someone from
That is correct, and Trevor is not here today also, so I was ready to say we're doing what we always do in the fall.
Okay, great. And we'll get more detailed update in October.
Yes, thanks.
Thank you. Right-of-way tree removals. There were several applications. There's been some broader discussion regarding trees. I don't know if people have any comment or questions about the applications in the packet this time.
I guess I have a question of whether there is more tree removal going on than usual, or whether it's just a random uptick. It had seemed like there was more than usual in my neighborhood, but that may just be a.
I can address that. There was a report. I thought that I sent it to you, but if I did not, I will. But I went to council about trees. And what it seems to be happening is, if you look at the history, it kind of goes up and down, but over the past 7 years, the first 5 years, the peak was 115 trees that were taken out. But then last year, it doubled to 230 or so. And then the next year after that, it actually tripled to about 345. So there's been a big jump here recently. If you look, wait, I'm sorry.
Bruce, where are you talking about? Trees taken out or building permits?
I'm sorry, I'm using, the building permits is what I was using first. The trees don't seem to follow a really high number or a high correlation to it. I did extrapolate out this year's numbers based on the first 7 months. It appears to be around 200 trees would be coming out this year. But the big news is that last year or 2 years ago, we doubled the permits, and then last year we tripled the permits. So we're seeing a lot more. Another thing is, I think that people are building in lots that were not desirable when other lots were available. For example, the ones along Hemlock. And we might not have noticed those if they were, someplace else, but because they're right there on the main street, they are standing out more. But clearly the permit activity has gone up significantly. And for those that have an interest, the city council, planning commission, and DRB are all meeting, talking about code changes to the code. Because what we're finding is that, well, people really are comfortable with the comp plan. The comp plan is not supported by the code. And so we're working through some of those issues. And the timing is, I was going to say the timing is excellent, but I wish we would have done it 2 years before we tripled our permits.
Thank you. That's great clarification. Please, go ahead.
I missed, were you saying that that group meeting was going to be taking place, or is taking place, about increase in building or in tree removal, or sort of tree removal incidental to building, or
It's not tied to tree removal, but it's all happening at the same time. What it's tied to is a recognition. For a long time, people were very comfortable with the comp plan, and the comp plan was protecting the city. But what we were seeing, and in doing further analysis by looking at the code and see how the code supports the comp plan, there are huge gaps. And so we said, instead of like going with the traditional process of giving it to the planning commission, giving it to the council, maybe they kick it back. DRB doesn't even know what's going on, but they're being talked about. It was like, let's have all those people in the room and try to work through these things. There are 3 items that are going to planning commission. We're calling it those the fast tracked items. And that is going to be prohibiting people buying 2 lots, knocking down whatever's on them, the cottages or whatever, and then building a big house. So combining of lots will be, by not allowing combining of lots, it keeps us on the small, cottage type, construction. The next one, everybody is familiar with the Nicholson PD And we're going to say no more PDs. And then the third one deals, I think, with Barb, was it the floor area ratio?
And lot coverage.
Right.
For a floor area ratio of lot coverage, again, to try to go ahead and not have things, expand so much. Then there was discussion of a fourth one, which dealt with the height of structures along the ocean front. And that one may move forward, or it may end up having more discussion depending how it goes at the planning commission. But there's a lot of discussion, including getting DRB more involved with residential structures and, trying to have more controls.
So the
Thank
numbers I talked about were in the staff report. And so that kind of summarizes the stuff you sent to council. So I can send that to the Parks Committee.
Sure.
Thank you. That would be great. And I just also, there was a very good discussion on trees and related to what Bruce was just talking about. Was it Wednesday of this week? The meeting went, work session, I think, Wednesday. So
Tuesday.
Tuesday. The Tuesday work session with council. So just, that's an additional, excuse me, conversation if folks want to hear that firsthand. So thank you, Bruce. I think the topic is alive, and with the increased pressure on building over the recent years, we're seeing how those different elements work together. And it's in terms of our committee, in terms of the work we're doing with heritage trees, and there was a good discussion with council also related to advocating for the trees. So I think we'll be hearing more about that. So
Yeah. My permission to pontificate for a moment.
sure.
Okay, the meeting that happened, it happened last Wednesday, the code audit. All right, I don't think we had 2 people, maybe 3 people, if that many, from the public attending and listening. That thing is a momentous effort right now that's going to drastically, hopefully improve the future of, what is going to be happening in Cannon Beach. And you folks, I know, all love the city and are very active. And so I would encourage you to participate in that process, because right now we are kind of in a default position. We're doing things the way we did because there was no real pressure. And now our rules are lax. And our intentions are good, but they're not necessarily in the code. So this is going to make a big difference on the city we have, 5-10 years from now, and then on out after that. So it's big, and we need everybody's input.
Thank you. And can you say again, just the audio was a little funky right at the beginning. Can you say again the process that you're advocating participation for?
Well, it's the code audit.
Code audit.
Discussion. We had the 3 groups there, but there was hardly anybody on Zoom. And this is probably one of the most important things. We literally are deciding the future of this town, or are we going to stay in a default position from the way it kind of grew organically, but there was no real pressure.
Yeah. Okay. So, thank you. Yeah, Betty?
I just wanted to say that I didn't get a chance to watch that, but I got to watch it on the live stream. Video after. And I think that's one of the beauties of videotaping these sessions, because if you don't have time that night, you can watch it later. So Bruce, I was very impressed with that meeting, and I really appreciate the input and the way everybody's working together to solve these problems. So thank you so much for your work.
Oh, thank you to everybody. And I wrote a note to the consultant, and I said, this is great, with 2 exclamation points. And she sent it back to me with 3 more exclamation points, because everybody was working together so well. The discussion was great.
Yeah.
Everybody's recognizing the need. It's really very cool process.
It was.
Thank you. Thank you. Okay, great. Well, we'll probably loop back around as we're moving through some of our items today, and this will certainly be something that's on our radar, and we'll as we're going forward. Okay, community grants. We've been in a process, as you know, of both our annual review that we always do after the grant process. We take a look at the application, we talk about the process from the year. We had some additional input from some applicants recently, and we identified some things that we wanted to consider or discuss further. And as a part of this, we had talked at one point, both for this and the heritage trees, about having a joint work session with council just to bring our ideas and proposals to them. So moving forward toward that, which I'm going to suggest we aim for November and see if we can get that work session with council in November. So in your packet, you had the current application, the most recent application timeline, just that information, just to refresh and take a look at. And I'd like to take a few minutes just to go through and see if people had specific comments specific to the application. So there is a broader discussion, but as we're going through these different pieces, let's just first look at the application, and either through things that you noticed this year that you think need to be addressed from the committee's point of view, and or just looking at it through the eyes as best as we can of an applicant. We want it to be clear, we want it to be supportive, and we want it to give everybody the information they need to move forward well. So let's talk about the application, the timeline, the application, the checklist, and the timeline in that order. Those are elements that are all part of that application packet. And I'm going to, if we can just kind of go page by page, and then we can talk more generally about the other elements. Does that seem like a good approach? Any other thoughts about how we move forward with this? Is that agreeable to everybody?
Yes.
Yes.
Okay. So looking at the application, I had a couple of thoughts here, but I want to just go page by page. So any input on the first page?
I think that one thing that should be conspicuous on the first page that I was never able to find very clearly anywhere is saying, this is what these are for.
What do you mean? This is what is for?
This what it is that the city wants to support with these grants. I sort of found the, let's see, I underlined somewhere. There are a couple of places where it refers to program/project. And in the evaluation criteria, I think it was, there are a couple of places referring to quality of life in Cannon Beach. But I think that whoever understands what the program is for should write something up, maybe just a short paragraph or a sentence or so about the purpose of the program.
Okay, so about the purpose of the grants program. So yeah. I know on the notice, which this packet.
Yep.
So that little first section there is saying nonprofit organizations providing programs, projects in arts, educational, recreational, environmental, community, or social services in Cannon Beach are invited to apply for funding, etc. That including something like that on the first page, so that it's clearer that these are the kinds of activities that the grants are aiming to support.
I think that would be a step in the right direction, and that this is saying what organizations. But I think that it seemed to me that the purpose of the program is or should be to support specific projects and programs, and that it is not intended to support day-to-day ongoing operations.
Okay, well, oh, you're hanging up a little bit.
And I think that should be made clear, and you know, I think that should be made clear.
So let's pause there, because that is one of the points that came up more generally in discussion, which was the kind of that distinction between operating expenses, support for operating expenses, and not versus, but the distinction between that and a specific project that an organization wants to do. So if I'm understanding you, that well, this might be a good place to pause and just talk about that a little bit more and see, is that something that we want to, is that a distinction we want to make, and does that accurately reflect what the city is supporting here? Because it's not the city's program, and we are just facilitating it, so we wouldn't be the deciders on that. Yeah.
Well, I think if an organization needs help with operating costs and they can tie it to part of their program, I don't see an issue with that.
With Barb.
Okay, in that case, I think we ought to be find a way to express that and put it in there so that that's clear. If not, for partly to clarify to organizations supplying it, also in the future to clarify to me and to other people who are not clear about that, who are on the committee about how we should be evaluating the applications.
So do we want
because I took against ones that seemed to me were asking for money to support ongoing operations, and maybe I shouldn't have.
Do we want to make a distinction, and it would be a little further in the application? Do we want them to indicate whether these are operating expenses? This is a grant to support their operating expenses, or this is a grant to support a specific project that they are wanting to mount? Is that a useful distinction?
If that, yes.
They kind of already make that distinction, don't they? I mean, at least
I think
our
so.
county made that distinction already in their application.
Right.
I think you're right. Mhm.
Yeah, I felt like when I read through the applications that I was able to, at least to my satisfaction, understand whether it was projects versus, specific categories, or if it was simply administrative costs. And we saw all of those things in last year's or this year's applications. But I think the information's there if you dig into it hard enough. I might, at this point, mention that I found it very difficult to dig into this application and the format that people were filling it out and sending it back in. But that's a separate thing we'll talk about.
Okay, so can we loop back around to that? Because that certainly is, I mean, that's very relevant. It's the ease of use of the application, both for the applicants and for us as we're going through them. Do you have, okay, so we're gonna tag that and come back. And Les, please, if I lose track of that, please bring us back to that after we go through the pages. One thing I noticed on the first page, and in several places that it's mentioned, some of the applications, it says provide, for example, line item budget for the current fiscal year, profit and loss statements for the past 2 years. I think if we could clarify what we mean by that, because in some instances we got, if there was a couple months into the year, we'd get a couple of months worth of budget. And so I think for each year, if we say provide profit and loss statements for the past 2 years, and then in parentheses, the actual years that we mean. So we get 2 full years of profit and loss statements, or the accurate year. So I would like to suggest that for each year, as we send the application out, we either bracket the specific years we want, or we clarify what we mean by that. So it's not the current year that they're in the middle of.
Could I ask a question that probably would be directed to Barb, as somebody who knows immensely more about accounting than I do? Is the phrase profit and loss statements the way we should be referring to this so they'll know what it is we want, even though these are nonprofit organizations?
Yes.
Thank you.
That's,
Thank you.
And so actually, before we go to that question about the fiscal year, do we want to include something like that statement, going back to Bob's point, that appears on the notice, just on the first page, stating again the types of organizations and what the purpose of the grants is? Do we need to say that it could be for specific projects and operating expenses, or is that a clarification? I'd just like to hear from other folks about where we land on that together.
I would like to see that added in there as clearly as possible, yes.
do we want to use the expression and or, say specific projects and or operating expenses?
Sure. I mean, yeah, that's possible. Any other thoughts about that element?
Do we want to wait? WEIGH, do you want to wait the operational with the program approach? Because a lot of grants I've written, you can't do, they specifically say you can't build a fence, or you can't, you have to use it for your program. So is there any, do we want to make a distinction? I don't know. That's just a question I had.
Yeah, I think that was kind of that initial, and if the city's purpose is to support both of those things, as we understand it, and if this is a point that we need clarification from council on, we can get that. I don't know if Bruce, if you have any input on that, but my understanding is that if we are supporting both of those, and that's what has been supported in the past, that would be a question that we need to take to council in terms of a question of changing the weighting of those, or how that's considered.
I don't think we need to change the weighting of them. I mean,
It's up to the organization
Right.
to basically sell their cause to us. And that's one of the reasons we have the interviews. And so, the fence, your example of a fence might be part of that organization's program, and not having the fence impacts it.
Right, things that allow the program or the organization to continue functioning.
Right.
Yeah. Our recommendations are in fact weighting, right? I mean, in terms of
Right.
consider as
True.
individuals, and so
Right.
that is in fact how that happens. So we agreed that we can perhaps include language from the notice, just on that first page somewhere towards the top, just clarifying these are the kinds of programs we're supporting. We could, if it's desirable, we could include a line about monies for specific projects or operating costs with specific description, what they would be for. And then perhaps clarify the current fiscal year and the past 2 years so that we know what we're talking about there.
Are we going to complicate or confuse things in this with respect to the instruction that if they're applying for funding for more than one project, that they should prioritize them? Are we asking them to say where in their priorities the operating expenses fall, or that falls outside of that prioritization? That's probably something that we would want to clarify.
Well, my sense is that they are making a case to us why they want the monies, and that would be part of their description of what they're.
And that is in there on page. Right.
I'm
yeah.
sorry?
That's on there, asking them if they have multiple requests to prioritize.
Yeah, and I'm aware of the time here. I know we've got several more items on the agenda, and as we're discussing this, I'm seeing that this may be a longer discussion. No, that's fine. But we want to. I want to make sure that we get through as much of this as we can. Are there other major considerations on the application itself that folks noticed or would like to address?
I think it might help if we give kind of a historical approach to how much has been requested in the past and how much is budgeted generally, because the budget hasn't been, excuse me, the budget hasn't been approved by the time the applicants are required to turn their applications in. But maybe just a paragraph about, in the past, the city council has approved $90,000 in their budget. Typically, our requests are much higher than the budgeted amount. And so please consider this when you're asking for your final dollar amount.
And we can refine the language, but somehow addressing the fact, because I think that is part of what we're always contending with. The asks can be very, very large, and there's no, I think as one of the applicants said, I mean, there's no, I mean, why not make the big ask, basically, and it doesn't side with the realities of the amounts being asked for and the amounts that we have to allocate. Are there other thoughts on that piece? Anything else on the application itself? Okay, great. We have a checklist. I think it's pretty clear. And again, in the interest of time, if you've identified specific things on the checklist, but I think that it does provide the applicant a way to clarify what it is that they need to present. So any question or comment on that piece or any other part of the application?
Elaine, I have a question about whether or not an application is incomplete. And I would like to suggest that we ask the city staff that is receiving the application to just look at the checklist and just kind of do a real quick check to make sure it's complete. And if it's not, to ask the applicant to get whatever is needed, because when we get the applications, we start reading them and making our decisions. And I don't think there's anybody that goes through and makes sure it's complete. And then we get to our public meeting, and by then it's too late for the applicant to furnish the missing information.
Yeah,
Thank you.
I would agree, because the way it is now, it leaves individual committee members, if they notice that something is not in the application, then we need to have an individual communication with staff to go back to the applicant to get it back in the packet. And I think it would be much more efficient, both with our time and our process, if that's something, and I don't think it has to be an in-depth review, but as you said, just everything on the checklist is there. And then we know that what we get has been determined to be complete.
Can I talk about that real quick?
Yeah.
So in the past we did, and that took hours and hours of staff time. And so then we made a decision at one point in time to not do that, so you guys can see what applicants submitted a complete application and what ones didn't.
And I've been through both of those scenarios, and I don't think it would take that long.
I did it for.
I know, but I mean, you have the checklist and you say, okay, they've got this, they've got this, they've got this, without reading it, just kind of page through it.
And I didn't read it, but I would have to. There was one year I called almost every applicant to say, you didn't sign your application, you don't have this, you don't have that, and you email them and you follow up, and it is a lot of work on staff. But then on the flip side, what about people who do put all that time and energy to give you a completed application versus the ones that don't? I mean, If you apply for a grant somewhere and you don't have a completed application, sometimes they throw your application completely out.
So what you're saying is that that initial pass where you just look at the checklist and say it's here or not is only a small part of the process that you were doing. You were also responsible for reaching out and giving them opportunities to fill it back in. And that was the time
That's what
consuming
takes the
part.
time.
Right.
And should we do that? Again, that's what I think you were headed toward is we're actually taking the people who put the effort in to do it right to begin with are kind of we're not giving them credit for that if we go to all this extra trouble on behalf of the others. Is that
Yes,
fair?
yeah.
Yeah.
I mean, that's what we did historically. It did take a lot of time. And that's when I came to the Parks Committee and said, do we need to do this? Because you should be responsible to submit a completed application.
Mhm.
I mean, there were times people didn't even sign it. I mean, there were just, they missed half the things. They didn't include their last evaluation. And it is just a lot of follow-up. But then you are responsible when you're asking somebody for money to turn in a completed application.
Yeah.
So I mean, I guess I can see where it'd be beneficial for the committee to make their process easier. But then now you're putting the onus on the staff to make sure the applicant is doing what they need to do.
I wonder if we could include and this may mean that we need to change the timeline somewhat, but maybe there's an initial phase where the applications come in, there's the deadline, the applications come to the committee takes that pass. We all look at, are they complete? We have one very brief discussion where we identify things that are not complete, and we would have to ascertain if it's not complete, do we just set it aside? Or if it's not complete, do we go back to the organization? I think we could do that as a committee, but we would need to change the process so we have that first pass and we have the time to do that, and then get the input from the applicants, or we can do that pass and as Jen is saying, responsibility is on the organization to turn in a completed application. And we can make it very clear in the instructions, if your application is not complete, it will not be considered, and then set it aside. So I think we could go at it either way, but I think we need to change the timeline and allow for that as like our first pass, if the committee is going to do it. Otherwise, I think it doesn't work for us to try to do it in our current flow. So thoughts on that?
I would be willing to do that. Yes. I think.
No, I just want to clarify whether we want to be, I think we should be a little more stringent because we're giving them a checklist. How many grants do you turn in that you don't go over the checklist? Make sure. I mean, is it our problem that they didn't do it? I think that once they turn it in, it's like a test. A kid doesn't get to change the answer. You know, these are adults and they're asking for money. So I think we should hold them to whether they do it or not, because it puts more work on somebody, whether it's staff or us. And that's just my mean thought.
I agree.
So, and I don't disagree, but at the same time, these are not professional accountants or people who, I mean, for the most part, I think these are people who are trying to do their best, but they're not necessarily the people you would choose to fill out a grant application on your behalf. They're busy doing their thing.
And a lot of them are volunteers.
And God knows volunteers, that's a whole, don't get me started on that. Can I suggest that, I don't mean to, we need to do it today, but do we really need all this stuff we're asking for? I just am asking the question, but it's like, could we simplify the request as a means of getting them more complete to begin with? Because some of the stuff we asked for was meaningless to me, but I assume that it's important to someone. I just was curious.
And some of these may be questions that we can bring to council, you know, I think, because ultimately it's the city is, you know, has determined kind of, what's here, but I think that's a good question. Any other thoughts on
I
that?
think-
And I think we need to move on. I think this is clearly, we've got more detailed discussion to have on this as we go forward.
Well, and I
Yeah.
think that's what the city council wanted us to do, is really dive in
Mhm.
to the whole process and make sure everything we're doing is not just because we've done it this way for years and years and years.
Yeah.
but Look at the whole thing.
Well, I'm gonna suggest that we have a work session on this specifically in the first part of November, so that we can, or the end of October, perhaps. It would have to be right at the end of October for me to be there, but so that we can have a little more spacious time to get into the details here. Is that something that's agreeable to everybody?
Yeah.
Yes.
Yes.
Okay, great. I don't know if we can schedule that now. I don't want to eat up our meeting time here, but can we aim for a date right at the end of October? And that will allow us then to still take information to council for their November work session, or for us to have a work session with council in November. So our meeting is on the 15th, looking at perhaps the week of the 25th of October.
I have our meeting is on the 21st.
Oh, 21st, yeah.
Yeah,
Oh,
15th is a Friday.
Oh,
so
you're
yeah,
right. I'm looking
21st.
Friday. Yeah, okay. So could we look at perhaps the 28th?
That's okay with me.
That's a Sunday, isn't it?
Thursday.
Thursday.
That's a Thursday
Whoa.
in October.
Oh, October. I thought we were talking about November. Sorry.
So October 28th tentatively, and if we can hammer out details if we need to, but we use our same time frame here, assuming that we're just.
Good.
Is there a meeting in this room at that time?
There is some staff meetings, Bruce. There's, Karen has, her staff meeting at 8:05. That sometimes runs a little late, and then she has one-on-ones with Rose.
Yeah, I don't want to change those.
Okay, so could you guys start at 10? The room is available at 10.
I can.
Yes.
That's gonna be-
Okay,
Yes.
great. Okay, work session 10 o'clock on the 28th, specific to the application process. And then I will send an email out with maybe some specific we'll be looking at to have ready for that. Thank you all.
Thank you.
Okay, we have a discussion, staff, on playground equipment. We have Bruce or staff person on hand for that?
Which one?
Playground equipment.
Oh, yes, I'm sorry. At the TAC meeting, there was discussion about some of the things that they might need to be focusing on. And one of the things that came up was an individual said, if we want to be encouraging families to come here and to live here, we really need to have an encouraging playground set up for that, to make that a priority. And then the discussion went on to making it an inclusive playground for folks here, for kids that are handicapped in some way or affected. And so we are trying to do a number of things to improve our accessibility. We just had a inspection by an ADA expert. We're making a couple of changes to help with that aspect, but it seems like we could potentially do some planning between now and the budget discussions, which really start in February, to see if we want to try to go ahead and do something along those lines and say, all right, we are about this. The inclusiveness, we have the access to the beach. I think I've talked before that Greg from over here at the surf shop is looking to do adaptive surfing down at Tolovana. So those are all things that it's like, wow, we could be known about that. And I think it's something that we could definitely get behind as a community. But there's going to have to be a lot of research on that and planning. And we'll have to come up with real numbers, for budget. So I was asking whether or not you folks would be willing to take that on.
And what would you see our role specifically as this kind of intersects with other discussions that have been going on? So how would you see Parks Committee's role more specifically, if you could speak?
Specifically, this one would be to do the research on the type of equipment, including the inclusive equipment, taking a look at the site that we have right now downtown. Would it make sense to have more than one location, have everything focused in one location, those kind of planning efforts? But it would be a huge help to find out that people really like this particular setup or what, whatever, to actually do that kind of research.
And then you'd be looking for a report or our findings in around January or by February. Is that kind of the timeline?
Yes. And to be as specific as possible. I prefer that we say with like this type of equipment, or we think it should be, limited to this location in the downtown park or these additional locations, so that we can just kind of take it, discuss it, and then run with it from the budget standpoint, and hopefully not have to do a lot of additional work to include it in the budget.
Well, I'd like to hear from other people on this. My first impression is that, some of that initial research work might, I think, be something we could talk about. When it gets down to getting specific numbers and giving, researching where to get the equipment and how much and where is it from these different places, I think that's a level of detail with our current workload that might be a bit more, but I'd like to hear from other folks on that. That's my first impression. But if we can support this in some way by doing some of that background work that's within our ability, given the other things we're working on, but maybe we can open it up and hear from other folks on that.
If I can just go first, Elaine, I agree with what you're saying. Don't expect you to go and find out where to buy and all those kind of things. But if there's like a certain attachment that can be, equipment that can be attached to a small wheelchair, those kind of things. Say we saw this in Bend and we saw it in Portland, or that Portland's doing it. That's fine, because then we can kind of do research on who sells them and the bidding and all that.
Great.
So
that's helpful.
Yeah.
So looking at options and things that might be
Yes.
good additions. Okay, great.
Just to get it to the budget level.
Perfect. Okay, thank you. Other thoughts on?
And it seems to me that I think I heard Bruce say that there's been some push from some people to do this, saying if we want to encourage people to bring their families here, we want to have playgrounds for the kids, and then be welcoming to them, and also accessibility. It seems to me that we could start with what are those people asking for? If we're responding to some encouragement to this, that it sounds like these are people who have had some thoughts about what they have in mind when they're asking for it.
Yeah, and I think if we go forward as a committee to work on this, that would be a great avenue to explore. I think just taking a little step back, just maybe we can just hear, does this seem like something that we can take on, that this is something that would be doable for the committee? So and then I think, yeah, Bob, definitely that would be a critical piece to begin with in terms of investigating and seeing what the options are. But other thoughts on this?
I think it's a great idea. I think we should move forward with it.
So I was trying to think about all of the different things that this committee would like to accomplish this year. And I don't have a real clear mental calendar on that, but would this conflict or compete with something else? We did talk about, what, 4 or 5 different initiatives that had to do with ECFR that we wanted to be a part of, or, you know, I think you need to think about it holistically, but I absolutely think this is a great program. I just am not the person who can say I'm willing to give up something else to take this on. That's a group decision.
But I don't think we can give up anything else that we're committed to.
That's fair enough too.
Yeah, I mean,
So
I have a question about the timeline, Bruce. I know, you know, in an ideal world, if this could all, you know, kind of fit into the budget process for this year, that would be great. Is there a way that the timeline might expand a little bit so that we're actively exploring this and gathering information, but where it might, I mean, it may not happen fully in this budget year, but you know, it feels much more doable to me if there's a wider window, but we do have a lot on our agendas between now and January.
How much of a window would you be comfortable with?
I think we could talk as a group, but is the idea that you would want this accomplished for this budget year, which means February, or is this a conversation that we could, I guess, how hard is that timeline?
It would need to be February so we can start looking at what the total requests are, how they would be funded, that sort of thing. Possibly go into March, but this is something that I want to see happen. And so I'm asking if the committee wants to participate in it, but if not, we'll find a way to get it done at staff level.
Well, I think it is, it's in line with our mission. And I think I am also sensitive to wanting to make sure that we can accomplish, as you know, what we've said we want to accomplish. So is this something we feel like we can bring some useful information with the understanding that we don't need to, you know, provide all the answers, but we might be able to provide some information that can help us move forward? Yeah, Betty. You're muted. Betty, you're muted.
One of the thoughts I have is we have already put some energy into wheelchair access to the beach. And maybe for the first step, we could expand that for children. I know there are maybe, I don't know if I think there is one for a child, but our Haystack Rock program is so special. And if it was really widely advertised that we have access for little children to get on the beach, to go to these this program, or you're talking about the adaptive surfing, those are the things we could maybe focus on right now, and then later get into the playground. I think the playground part is going to be a little more detailed. So that would be my recommendation. We start, you know, with something we've already got a handle on, and then move on to something that's going to be a little more complicated. So that would be my recommendation.
So over the course, say, for example, if we were to look at the course of this year, maybe look specifically for this next budget year, what would need to be in place to expand that access to the beach and to some of those elements for this year, and then we use the that broader range of time to be looking at playground equipment and talking to folks who would be interested in using that and getting that kind of information. So it's kind of like the first phase, and then a broader phase going into the equipment.
I can tell you that HRAP is already dealing with the beach access. We're going to be getting new and different wheelchairs. The program for adaptive surfing already has a team that's working on it. It's the Surf Shop, ODRP, and City. So we already, you know, have those kind of taken care of, and the surf shop is already doing it someplace else, I think Lincoln City or Newport. So they have experience with it. So the one that I think that is, I think is the next step is the playground. And I think that, and I understand your workload and all that, but it's something that we want to see happen. And so if it doesn't fit into your schedule, we'll get it into ours.
I'd be willing to do research. I could ask Mike to help do research on some, maybe different communities that have different playground equipment.
Mhm.
I think it's really important that we move forward with this, and it is part of the parks.
Yeah.
So I think we should move forward with it.
And I would be happy to help.
Right.
So
So, oh, I'm sorry, Les, go ahead.
No, I was just, I guess in some sense, I was adding my support because I was going to make the same offer. I'll go out and see if I can't find something.
Okay.
Let's just do it.
Yeah.
And we'll work with you. We can do some research as far as the manufacturers that are, providing things, that kind of, but being able to check with people that have the equipment and find out what gets used and what doesn't, those kind of things would be huge.
And then going back to Bob's point, if the city has any anything that will help us to focus our research in terms of the types of things, or if it's just playground equipment more generally, we can certainly do that. But let's all of us find out what we can and bring it to in October, and we'll kind of see where we are at that point. We can move forward with it, because I'm hearing support for it, and some willingness to dig in a little bit.
Okay, thank you. Thank you.
Thank you. Okay, heritage trees. We have in our packet, thanks Stacy and Barb, a draft for the tree nomination form, the application. We heard about the criteria last time. A little more generally, actually, if Bruce is still here, can we get a work session with the city council in November to talk about this and the grant application? That was something they had offered at some point earlier in the summer. And is that a reasonable timeline for us to look to? If you, okay, I'll follow up on that. So we had talked about some draft language for an ordinance, and we have the nomination form. I want to turn it over to Stacy and Barb here first, just to see if you have any thing you'd like to say about this, and thank you for putting this together.
Well, I think we would like to ask the committee if they have any questions on the application that we submitted. If you think it covers everything. Just for full disclosure, this was a steal from other cities. We didn't reinvent the wheel.
Best way.
So
I didn't see anything that I took exception to.
Great.
Thank you.
I didn't see any thing that I have exception to, but Les and I are looking in more deeply into the criteria, and we've come up with 16 different issues we're looking at. But one of the questions we had last time was property owner responsibility. And the application is wonderful, but I just know that from looking into it, the property owner would be required to maintain the tree, and to even trim the tree, they would have to have a permit to get it pruned. So it does put a little bit of an onus on the owner, and I'm not sure. I mean, maybe we should talk about that a little bit before we put kind of spread this out. And
the application would go with the criteria. It wouldn't be a standalone. So the owner's responsibilities would be included as part of the application, along with the criteria of the program.
Yeah.
okay, all right.
And one thing we might, one thing we might take to council when we're in our discussion with them, you know, there may be ways that if a property owner, I don't know how they do this in other cities, but if a property owner takes on is willing to have a heritage tree in their property, maybe there's a way that the city can, that they can, you know, we can facilitate those kinds of things like tree trimming and tree health or checkups or something like that, so that there can be a mechanism that the property owner is supported in that process. So there are easy avenues to access that information, or a schedule of, you know, if it's a heritage tree on your property, you know that there's going to be a scheduled check of its health at whatever point, or I don't know the details of what it would need to be, but I think that's something that maybe, you know, there can be a partnering with the city so that the support's coming from both sides.
It sounds like a good idea.
That seems to go along with a question that I think I had before, and I know I do now, and that is, in the research into this, is there reporting of whether having a heritage tree on your property tends to either increase or decrease the value of the property?
So, Bob, I did note your question last time, and I did do some research. I'm going to take the mask off just so I'm a little more clear anyway. There is a lot of published data that suggests the value of having big trees on property value is clearly correlated. It's that as much as 20% premiums for properties that have spectacular stuff. Yes.
And excuse me, Les, I'm just gonna, okay, I'm sorry, finish your thought, and then I think I'm sorry, Stacy, did you have your hand up?
No, Bruce was just heading.
Bruce was leaving.
So we were just waiting. For that.
Oh, I see. Okay.
Anyway, what?
Are there any more questions for me? I just have to.
No.
I do have one about scheduling, Bruce. I'll email you.
Okay. I'll just finish my thought. As far as specific to having a heritage tree, though, I couldn't find any real positive things, more about the implied negative things, having to have permits to prune the tree, restrictions on things you could do around the tree, you know, all in the vein of protecting the heritage tree and the loss of freedom that the owner has. So that's what I found.
Okay, great. Thank you. And just to FYI, you're very audible with masks, so it's good. Okay, so does that address that, Bob, for you?
I guess. Thank you. Yeah, thanks, Les. Thank you for looking into that, Les.
Yeah, and we can continue to, you know, talk to other heritage tree programs and see if that's something we can get more on. But yeah, big trees are desirable. So are we, I have a question, I guess that in terms of the nomination, do we know how often we're going to have trees nominated? Is this something that's year round? Is it an open thing? Is it?
The research that I found, they did it, like, I think in Lake Oswego, they did it once a year. So you can turn the applications in anytime, the nominations, but they meet once a year to discuss it. And so we would need to determine, do we want to meet once a year about it? Do we want to meet twice a year about it? We would just need to make our own determination. That's my personal opinion.
Yeah. And I think we should do it twice a year.
Great. Do we want to include that on the nomination form, or would that be somewhere else in like our more general information about the program?
I think in more general information.
Okay.
Along with the criteria. Right.
So we've got criteria, and you got Les and Betty, is there anything else regarding criteria that you guys found or want to speak to?
I think we're going to wait until the next meeting because we have a lot of research more to do on this. So we're going to wait till we have it better pulled together.
Thank you for.
I think we ought to wait to go to council then, maybe until December.
Okay.
So we can make sure we have all the information needed for them.
Do it once.
Now, I'm just thinking if we do a work session with council in December rather than November for both the grants and the heritage trees, if we have things to specifically propose, they could adopt those in January if it's anything that needed a vote. And that would still keep us in line for our timeline for grants. Is that correct?
Yeah, but it might be better to, it might be easier on the council's agenda if we did grants in November and trees in December.
Oh, okay. Like we just do two separate.
But I could be wrong.
So I do have you guys down at the November work session as a possibility for community grant discussion.
Okay, that's what I thought.
Because, Kelsey said, hey, they're talking about the joint work session. And so we went ahead and plugged you in on November 9th
Okay,
at the regular work session. And if you want, I can go ahead and plug you in as an item on the December work session.
Okay,
And then we can always change it.
okay.
Because this far out, there's not much planned.
right.
You know.
That's great. Thank you. That'd be perfect. And so we've got November and December. We can talk about grants in November and heritage trees in December. Does that seem like a good?
Yes.
I think we need to have a good discussion in the October meeting about the criteria.
Absolutely.
Great. Perfect. Okay. One question I'll just throw out there is, I was thinking about change of ownership. So if there's a heritage tree, this is just something for us to find out more about. If an owner has a heritage tree on their property and they've been maintaining it and then they sell the property, are there precedents in terms of if you agree to buy a property with a heritage tree on it, how's that communicated to the new owner and what's the status with other programs? How do they manage that?
Yes, they do. They do require that it remains a heritage tree. I know that from experience. So I just think that it's ongoing. It doesn't change with ownership.
Great. Okay, perfect. Thank you.
How do you do that? Like,
Legally,
I wouldn't want it to be that way, because if you bought a home that already had that grandfathered in, I would think you should be able to make the decision, not already have it made for you. But that's my thought.
Well, that might be part of that bigger discussion. It was just a thing that I think if we're going to have a program, it could come up. So we want to look at how that's dealt with.
it might be something the city attorney needs to look at,
Okay, great. Anything else on heritage trees for today? Did I miss anything?
How's the ordinance coming along?
Oh, right. Thank you. The ordinance. Any draft language on that? Or anything to report related?
Bob, I think that was your responsibility. Weren't you going to work on the ordinance?
Did you take a look at any language for heritage tree ordinance?
I did not. Let me put that in capital letters here.
Okay, so let's bring that to our. Would it be? I'm wondering if we want to have a work session on this as well, or if we want to include this into our October work session. Does that feel like it's overloading the work session? Both of these items.
Can we see how much we get accomplished in the regular meeting in October?
Sure.
Kind of make those two things our priority.
Yeah, that sounds good. And what I was hoping is that we would, when we meet with council, we would be able to bring some draft language. Like this is, of course it has to get approved by the attorney, but proposing an ordinance so that it will give council something to work on and something for the attorney to refine if needed, so that we can get the ordinance in place first, and then establishing the heritage tree program as we're getting these elements, so that's the underpinning and it's established with the city, I think is an important early step. So let's work together on that. I think any of us can take a look at other ordinances, and let's see if we can start talking about some draft language for an ordinance at the October meeting. Is that reasonable?
Yes.
Okay, great. Anything else on heritage trees for today? Okay. So we'll have this as if we move swiftly through our work with grants, we will revisit this at the work session potentially, but we're going to see what we can get done at the October meeting. And then any updates for the annual projects? I know we had a little discussion about that. I think the trees and the grants are a little more time sensitive, but if any of the kind of exploratory work that's been going on or investigating for our projects this year, is there any reports from anybody?
No.
Go ahead, Betty.
Yeah, Betty?
Les and I have been working on blackberries, and we've, thanks to Trevor, we've located a site where we're going to do a pilot project right outside the EFCR. And one of the wonderful things that Trevor said was, once we get the blackberries controlled there, we could plant a grove of cedar trees, which made me very happy. So the exciting part about getting rid of the blackberries is we'll be able to replant native shrubs and then native trees, or I mean, not native trees, but trees. And so that it would keep the blackberries from coming back because they don't like shade. So,
That's great. I know that was one of the questions, is what to replant.
Yeah, we're going to be working on that. So we're deep in the weeds on that. So
Good job.
Thank you. And, just to put maybe a little pin, if we can safely do it, that might be a great field trip for the committee. If we can get ourselves up there and distance, but it's outside, we can take a look at it. And then I think we can talk together about what would a pilot project look like, what are the different methods we're looking at as we get into more specifics with that. So thanks.
be great.
For
Yeah.
that.
Is that by the cache site?
That is, yes, sir.
Yes.
Thanks.
Perfect. Okay, we will keep plugging away at the projects updates, but I think let's focus on our kind of more time sensitive things, knowing that that's going to be an ongoing discussion. So any updates on, I guess Bruce is gone. So I have not heard anything regarding OWEB input on the plan.
I haven't heard anything either yet.
They haven't. Okay, great. Thanks. So we'll keep following up on that. I guess we have our work session scheduled. Anything else regarding the ECFR folks want to address before we move to go to the order?
Well, another thing, we were going to, Bob and I are working on the signage for the ECFR, and I'm going to send in a little, I'll send you some documentation on what we've come up with. So that maybe we could talk about that in the next meeting.
Great.
Okay. All right.
Perfect. Take a look at that, and we'll just keep putting that on the moving forward. And if there is, I won't be here in October, but if that idea about doing a field trip or starting to talk more specifically, if it's reasonable to look at scheduling that a little further out, that would be great to do. Okay. Anything for good of the order today? All right. Thank you all very much. I know this was a densely packed time and we went a little bit longer. Jen, thanks for being here and
Thanks for having me again.
handling all the the end of technical and otherwise stuff. All right. Well, I thank you all very much for great work and discussion today, and we'll look forward to seeing you in November. And actually no, the end of October. So I'll see you on October 28th.
Thank you.
Okay, we are adjourned.
Great.
Bye.
Thanks.
Thanks, Jen. Thanks. make sense to contact that gentleman that did the ADA audit?